You are watching a BET News special, State of Our Union, Reproductive Rights, an exclusive conversation with Vice President Kamala Harris.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We are on the campus of Howard University in Washington, D.C., inside the Crampton Auditorium for this important BET News special. I'm Erinn Haines, Editor-at-Large for the 19th News, an independent, nonprofit newsroom reporting on gender, politics, and policy. On the eve of the pivotal midterm elections, we wanted to hold a critical conversation on an issue that is important to so many Americans, especially Black and brown women, the state of reproductive rights. And there's a lot to discuss. So joining me tonight, let's welcome actress DeWanda Wise. DeWanda is the star of the upcoming Showtime series, 3 Women. Welcome, DeWanda. And also with us, I am pleased to welcome a Howard University alum, the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. Welcome. Welcome. Okay. Yeah. Well, please have a seat. Have a seat. Welcome to you both, and welcome back to Howard, Madam Vice President.
It's good to be home.
Yes. Okay, well, with that, let's get started. And Madam Vice President, I'm going to start with you because it does not seem hyperbolic to say that this is a critical moment in our nation's history on so many levels, but unquestionably with respect to women's reproductive rights. So we had the Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court precedent that was set in 1973, suddenly overturned this summer in 2022. I just want to start by asking you, how did we get here?
Well, let's first, I start with just acknowledging, to your point, what has just happened, which is the highest court in our land, the United States Supreme Court, the Court of Thurgood Marshall, just took a constitutional right that was recognized from the people of America, from the women of America. And on this subject, I think it's very important to also acknowledge one does not need to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government should not be telling her what to do with her body. If she chooses, she will consult with her loved ones, with her pastor, her priest, or her rabbi. But this is about the government apparently deciding in so many states that they're in a better position to tell her what's in her best interest than she is to decide what is in her best interest. And I say on this issue, we need to take back the flag, because this is about freedom and liberty. Founding principles of our nation, freedom and liberty. And what we have seen happen as a result of this decision is that in states around our country, so-called leaders, extremist so-called leaders, are proposing and passing laws that would criminalize doctors, nurses, and healthcare providers. Literally, they are outlining jail time for these healthcare providers if they provide reproductive health care. We're seeing these so-called leaders propose and pass laws where there will be no exception for rape or incest. Now, a lot of my career I spent as a prosecutor, and as a prosecutor I specialized in violence against women and children. I specialized in child sexual assault cases. The idea that anyone who claims to be a leader would suggest that after an individual has survived such an act of violence and violation to their body, and then suggest that afterward that individual will still not have the ability, much less the authority, to make decisions about what happens next to their body. It's immoral. Immoral. And I was talking to some of our young leaders who are here today, and I said, we've, up until now, and many of us are children of parents who fought for civil rights and marched, including me, we defined the progress of our country in many ways, including that progress was measured by an expansion of rights. And now we are seeing, on so many issues, efforts to restrict rights. So understand what this means, not only for the individuals that will directly be impacted by that decision, but what it means in terms of a trajectory that we are apparently on that is about regression, not progress.
Yeah, Madam Vice President, I just want to stay with you on that point for a minute, because you have been talking to the American people about the relationship between what has happened on the other side of this Supreme Court decision and the relationship between that freedom and the erosion of rights in this country. Why is it important for you to really make that connection for people? What is it that you want people to understand about what that connection is?
There's a pattern here. So I happen to love Venn diagrams. Yes, you know those three circles? So I brought props. I just have two, so bear with me. Venn diagram.
Let me hold it.
Wow. We are in college.
So I asked my team, tell me, from which states are we seeing attacks on individual freedoms as it relates to reproductive choice? From which states are we seeing attacks on freedom as it relates to the right to vote? From which states are we seeing attacks on freedom to marry the person you love? And you would not be surprised to see there is an intersection.
Yeah.
See what's at play. See what's at play. But here's the other thing that this tells us also. Not only to see what is happening and see the constellation of it all, right? What do these individual things describe as a picture? But herein also lies the opportunity to rededicate ourselves to the coalition, to bringing folks together who seemingly have nothing in common. Folks who've been fighting forever for voting rights, fighting forever for reproductive health rights, maternal health, fighting forever on LGBTQ rights, to bring folks together in coalition, to stand together, knowing that we all have so much more in common than what separates us, and that it is incumbent on each of us to make sure nobody has been made to fight alone. So I say to our leaders, and in particular our young leaders, if you look at the best movements in our country that have been about progress, one of the main ingredients of those movements has been coalition building.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So let's rededicate ourselves to that.
Yeah. DeWanda, you're sitting here, we're listening to the Vice President. I'm wondering, just to take a beat, so many people are processing this Supreme Court decision. Were you surprised by the court's ruling this summer? What was your reaction?
I was like, oh, I don't need to watch the season of The Handmaid's Tale. And I was definitely among those who just thought it was a law. So when Dobbs came down, it was that kind of disembodied moment of horror. But, I'm a Black woman, so kind of immediately that sense of, the text messages, the getting everyone, I've been meeting with like the same group since then, weekly, and it's exactly what you just described. It's doctors, it's lawyers, it's activists. My primary interest, this is a huge mental health issue, as you can imagine. So there's just this darkly beautiful sense of just trying to attack it from every angle and share as much information, as many resources and facts as possible.
Yeah, just trying to make sense of this in the many different ways, the many implications that this could have for our country and for so many millions of Americans across this country. Well, Madam Vice President, I have covered you as this administration is really kind of dealing with a lot of the issues that are facing this country, and yet as a reporter, I've also kind of watched you as you focus a lot of your time and energy on this particular issue in a way that really seems personal. Why is that?
You know this, Erinn. My mother raised me and my sister. My mother had two goals in her life: to raise her two daughters and to end breast cancer. So my mother was a cancer researcher, one of the very few women, and certainly one of the very few women of color.
Yeah.
And from the earliest time of my life, I remember my mother fighting for the dignity of women in the healthcare system. Knowing that, and I became aware at a very early age that can't be taken for granted. I think we'll talk at some point about maternal health and maternal mortality. I was aware at my earliest ages that Black women, women of color, are treated differently in the healthcare system. Women are not taken seriously in the healthcare system. And so it is something that has been a part of my life and my way of thinking about what needs to be addressed since the earliest stages. And then just doing this work over the years and seeing, sadly, that yes, we have made some progress, but there is still so much work to do. And that's why it is so important that we have leaders who use their bully pulpit in a way that reminds people of their rights and just clears up the misconceptions and the confusion. Because the worst thing that anyone can experience is to feel alone and unsure of who is there for them and what is available to them in terms of help. One of the most powerful things that we do is to remind people they are not alone, they are not being judged, there is help. We are a community of people who have compassion and empathy. That's one of the most important things I think we can do right now, in addition to this fight and the work. Right.
Absolutely. Coming up, we are going to discuss those real-world implications of the Supreme Court's decision, specifically on the lives of Black and brown women. We've still got a lot to unpack here, so stay with Welcome back. We are here with actress DeWanda Wise and Vice President Kamala Harris. So, Madam Vice President, I want to pick up on what we were talking about before the break, because with this ruling, I mean, even as a journalist that's trying to cover these issues day to day, it can be hard to follow these laws that are really pretty fast changing. So I'm wondering what you can say about the status of reproductive rights across the country right now.
Well, it's varied. And what we're seeing is that different states are proposing different approaches. But what I can tell you is that people are very confused, and so it is important that we are clear about their rights. The other issue that I'm seeing as I travel the country is for those states who have maintained the rights of people to make this decision for themselves, they are in a neighborhood geographically, many of them, where the states around them have restricted rights. So what we're also seeing is in those states that have maintained and protected these rights, they're seeing an influx of people, and it is putting a burden on their system. The other concern that I think we all have is what this means for so many people in terms of that if they don't have these rights in their own state, they have to travel. So that's the cost of a bus ticket, a train ticket, a plane ticket. We know the majority of women who receive these services are mothers.
Right.
So that means childcare. If they are fortunate enough to work somewhere that gives them paid family leave, maybe they'll be okay, or paid sick leave. But otherwise, they're looking at losing pay and income. And so what this means in terms of the additional layers of burden that are being put on people and the unfairness of it all is pretty extreme. I've convened, for example, university presidents to talk also about, for students, college students, community college students, what are they doing in terms of ensuring that their students will not be penalized if they're in a state that does not provide access to reproductive care? What are they providing so that those students will not be docked for absenteeism, unexcused? What it will mean in terms of, again, the legal liability that so many people are concerned about. Thankfully, the United States Department of Justice has pulled together a task force, and part of the work that they are doing is convening pro bono lawyers, so lawyers who will provide their legal services for free, because so many healthcare providers, people who work at clinics, are also unsure of what they're going to be exposed to in terms of legal liability. And that raises an additional issue among the many, which is the amount of threats that people who provide these services are enduring.
DeWanda, I want to come to you and just ask, what about you? What are you hearing from your family, from your friends, from folks in the community, just really in terms of their fears and concerns and thoughts about what these real world implications are on the other side of this ruling?
I mean, horror stories. One of the earliest stories was a doctor, Dr. Caitlin Bernard, who was being threatened in every way, legally, physically, for providing care to a 10-year-old rape victim, And so really pooling these kind of resources together to just be all hands on deck, and provide support. But you really don't need to look far. You asked Madam VP what her personal connection was, and before my mother had my brother and I, she had a ectopic pregnancy. Thank you, ectopic pregnancy. And it was one of those things where I knew it peripherally growing up, but really didn't, it didn't hit until the last several months. And it wasn't even a matter of being like, oh, I wouldn't be here, which is, wild to be like, I physically wouldn't be here. But just even thinking about a world where Margie Matthews isn't here, is really wild to me. So now, part of the protection and the federal protection is ensuring that even those emergency procedures are protected everywhere, because they're coming under attack too. And those are life-saving. When we talk about the mortality rate for Black women,
Absolutely.
it's just, it's absolutely unthinkable.
Well, DeWanda, you're making a point that, certainly I think all of us as Black women know, and that is that access to reproductive care is not just about access to legal and safe abortion care. And sadly, we do know that maternal mortality does disproportionately impact Black women. Madam Vice President, I know I don't have to say that to you, because throughout your tenure, you have been very focused on addressing these disparities, on trying to really address that inequality. And so I just wonder if you can talk about how the administration, how you are thinking about this, what the administration is doing about that work, particularly in this moment.
Well, on the issue of maternal mortality, Black women are 3 times more likely to die in connection with childbirth. Native women, twice as likely. Women who live in rural America, 1.5 times more likely. On the issue of Black maternal mortality, the facts are clear. It literally has nothing to do with her socioeconomic level or her education level. It has everything to do with the fact that when she walks into that clinic, that doctor's office, or that hospital, she is not taken as seriously.
Yes.
So when I was in the Senate, I proposed a bill that would address the racial bias component of this and require training of healthcare providers on the issue of racial bias. And this issue of maternal mortality, it also causes me to pause and to consider that the hypocrisy of these so-called leaders who want to say that they are for life, but where have they been on the issue of maternal mortality?
Yeah.
Where have they been?
Yeah.
Absent. And, but it is an issue that is about, it's the need for advocacy, the need to have what might be difficult conversations for some, but must be had around the disparities in our healthcare system in general, based on income and based on race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I may, my mother is a minister in a Methodist church.
Yes.
And their position in the Methodist church is it's for mothers. Yeah. It's pro-life. It is for the life of the women whose lives are in danger.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just think that's huge.
Yeah. Such an important and ongoing conversation that I know you'll continue to have, Madam Vice President. Well, we have just heard a bit about what your administration is doing, but also what can people, especially young people and people of color, what can they do to make change? Let's discuss that after the break.